The longship rears like a beast against the horizon, an oak-bellied dragon with its ribs groaning in protest. 30-foot swells rise like walls, slamming down with fury as the square sail flutters. Then snaps taut in a gust that feels sharp enough to flay. You don't steer a ship like this, you endure it. Salt lashes your eyes. Every breath tastes like brine and ire. The man next to you is bleeding from the palms. Rope burns seared into flesh as he pulls against a fraying line. Oars groan in waterlogged tholes, some slipping loose, others splintering under pressure. A cry cuts through the wind, someone's fingers, crushed between beam and board. No time to look. The sea does not wait. The dragon prow leaks tar in black trails down its carved snout. Beneath your feet, water sloshes, freezing and alive, battering the hull with thunderous rhythm. The wind howls through the rigging like a curse. You are cold. You are shaking. But you row. Because stopping means dying. Tonight, we set sail into the brutal reality of Viking sea travel, where every voyage was a battle for survival. Mist swirls low over a rocky estuary, veiling the sea in ghostlight. The longship rises with a groan as Eric, the helmsman, digs his knuckles into the steering oar. The horizon bulges, swells, then crashes down in a wall of white. A rogue wave slams the deck. Salt water surges through the gunwale. Starboard, Eric roars, but his voice is lost to the wind. The rudder bucks beneath him. His shoulders lock. His arms quiver. Water pounds the hull in bursts, as if trying to pry it apart with fists. Freightis stumbles across the slick planks, eyes locked on the mast foot. The bindings have slipped, the base skidding dangerously loose. She dives ropes, wrap her arms, cut her skin. Her wool cloak snaps behind her like a torn sail, soaked and screaming in the gale. Wood splinters under her knees. The ship stinks of wet wool, fear, and tar. Oars slap into the waves in staggered desperation. Then a shout, high, cracking. A young deckhand tumbles backward, skull meeting timber. He drops, limbs slack, floating in the rising flood. Freightis lunges again, frost biting her fingertips as she releases the brail line. The sail snaps like a beast unleashed, whipping the air. The longship yowls, listing sideways into a trough, the sea curling around it like a mouth. For one long second, everything tilts. Oars crash into foam. The men brace, arms shaking, eyes wide. One weeps openly, frozen lips mouthing the prayer of an old home far behind him. The sea howls wood shrieks. Somewhere beneath the chaos, a scream fractures the rhythm of breath. At the stern, Eric throws his weight into the rudder, his face a mask of salt and blood. He growls between gasps, voice torn and ragged. Hold her or drown. The world tilts. Then Black, ChatGPT said, today, oceans feel curated glass and guidance. We cross them in floating cities, humming with amenities. Cappuccinos on tap, GPS whispers, mapping every mile. A child points to a glowing screen. Look, we're right here. Off Greenland's coast, perfectly plotted. The deck sparkles beneath string lights. Somewhere nearby, lounge music hums beneath the laughter of sun-kissed passengers. Now, cut to another deck, another time. The sea is grey, the deck soaked. Planks bend and groan underfoot. Oars rise and slam in ragged rhythm. No digital feedback, no course correction, just Starsif, visible wind, memory, and prayer. A Viking crew lurches through the swell, jaws clenched, soaked to the marrow. No railings, no rescue, every motion is a gamble. Steel here is polished, warm from the sun. There, it rusts around a bent rivet. One hand sips, the other bleeds. What we call navigation, they call survival. Modern vessels turn storms into inconveniences, reroutes, minor delays. On board, a captain's voice announces weather ahead smooth, practiced.com. Some passengers barely look up from their screens. Back then, a storm was something else entirely. Phratis braces as hail lashes her cheeks. Her hair is slick with salt. Her fingers roar against the mast. The ship keens sideways. Eric shouts, "She's turning." The wind doesn't answer. It only punishes, radar beeps. On the other ship, no one gets wet. The Vikings didn't steer from storms. They entered them bone breath. Well, their navigation was not a program. It was inherited instinct. Sunstones shimmer in misty hands, used to find light where no light should be. They traced birds, felt the shape of clouds, studied the seas, swelled the way we read numbers. Plastic knobs click beneath a gloved hand. A whale blubber lamp flickers over tide-marked wood, smoke curling toward the night. Today, we ride oceans. They survived them, and we call that progress. Viking sea voyages were not mere journeys. They were relentless trials of endurance. These wooden dragons, built without keels and forged from overlapping clinker planks, sealed with pine tar and ox hair, were designed not to defy the sea but to move with it. Their strength lay in flexibility. The hull bent beneath waves, swayed with storms, sometimes snapping under pressure, but that dance with the ocean was what kept them afloat. A shipwright's voice echoes the truth. These vessels bent under stress. That's what saved them and, sometimes, what snapped them. The slap of a wave vibrates through the hull. Tar fumes mingle with the salty air, and wood creaks like the very breath of the ship itself. Food was sparse, and unforgiving hardtack so dry it shattered teeth. Fish dried to brittle flakes, and brine too foul to trust. A crew member gnaws desperately at a biscuit, lips cracked and bleeding. A waterskin leaks a dark, unpalatable liquid. The crunch of stale grain mingles with the gag of rising fish oil. Nearby, a deckhand weeps quietly, thirst clawing deep beside a sealed barrel of brackish water. Many died not by storm or sword, but by salt, starvation, and silence. When the stars vanished behind thick fog, Vikings turned to their sunstones. Rough crystals held to the light to reveal hidden angles and watched seabirds cutting through the mist. A navigator squints, clutching his sunstone, while a seer chants over carved runes, her voice rising with the wind's howl. Navigation was both science and spirit, an interplay of sky, sea, and sacred ritual. They believed storms bore moods and gods had opinions. Bird wings slice through fog. Footsteps thump during midnight oaths. The sharp scent of burnt sage mingles with seawater. This was no mere exploration. It was controlled desperation, a battle for survival against every tempest and shadow. Viking ships were marvels, not of solid mass, but of flexible craftsmanship. They weren't carved from a single trunk, but built plank by plank thin oak strakes, overlapping like fish scales, each nailed and riveted with iron. Between these planks, pine tar was smeared, mixed with strands of animal hair to plug inevitable leaks. These seals never held forever. The sea found every gap, creeping cold and wet inside. The hiss of hot tar meeting cold wood filled the air, mingling with salt spray. Rivets hammered rhythmically, the sound a pulse beneath the creak and flex of the hull, which breathed with the motion of the waves. As a maritime archaeologist explains, leaks were inevitable. Tar and hair were stopgaps against icy water, but they never held forever. Images shift from sonar scans of sunken burial ships to workshops where oak ribs are steamed over molds, shaped by hands both skilled and hurried. Propulsion came from the crew's raw strength and a single square wool sail, dyed with woad to a deep blue. Up to 32 oarsmen pulled in unison, muscles locked against biting cold and exhaustion. The oars cut through choppy grey waters, splashing and slapping in relentless rhythm. The sail, heavy and cumbersome, only caught wind when conditions allowed. The creak of wood and the slap of blades against water blended with bitter, biting wind against exposed skin. Nautical anthropologists remind us, before engines or GPS, power was raw endurance. Rowers battled exhaustion and frostbite alike. Faces froze in focus, sweat and salt mingling under woolen hoods and leather jerkin. Food was survival, never comfort. Hardtack, hammered from barley, often molded or too brittle to chew. Dried cod and liver, rich in vitamin D, were salted and stored in brine that could harbor botulism. Fresh water held in animal bladders soured quickly, becoming rancid and fostering dysentery. A crew member gnaws at a biscuit, his cracked lips telling of months at sea. Nearby, another grimaces as he sips sour, briny water. The crunch of stale grain mixes with the faint, sour smell rising from the bladders. As a maritime archaeologist warns, scurvy, dysentery, and poisoning were as deadly as storm's hidden enemies in every voyage. Navigation balanced on science and superstition. Sunstone's crystals found in archaeological digs in Diribi Fjord were thought to polarize sunlight, helping Vikings find the sun behind clouds or fog. Star charts etched on wooden tablets guided nighttime journeys. Seabirds' flight inland signaled proximity to land. A navigator squints through dense fog, sunstone in hand, while a seer chants over a carved rune, voice rising with the wind. Bird wings slice fog, footsteps beat out a midnight oath. The sharp scent of burnt sage mingles with seawater. A nautical anthropologist explains. Their methods were ingenious but also reliant on signs from nature and gods. This was no mere travel, it was an act of controlled desperation. Every longship was a shrine. Runes carved into dragon-headed prows invoked Aegea's favor, the god of the sea. Drip rings on the stern promised safe return. Berserkers, bodies trembling with fury, screamed incantations to terrify the storm itself. Flames flicker against carved wood. The rasp of chanting roughens the wind. Burning sage and salty sea brine mix in the cold air. A maritime archaeologist describes these rituals as psychological armor, reinforcing courage in the face of nature's indifference. Ships were built fast to seize raiding seasons. Speed was prized over durability. Shipwrights steamed oak planks, bending them over molds, hammering rivets with precision and urgency. Sparks flew in workshops where fresh-cut wood smelled of sap and fire. Hammer strikes echoed off beams. A nautical anthropologist points out, fast construction meant more ships at sea but less margin for survival during extended voyages. Below decks, space was tight and precious. Provisions were packed in barrels under benches, secured against shifting seas. The scent of brine-soaked sacks mingled with stale air. Wooden barrels clinked quietly as the ship rocked. Every meal was a gamble. Rot and thirst stalked the hull as surely as enemies. A maritime archaeologist reminds us, rot and thirst were as dangerous as enemy swords. From plank to prow, the longship was a compromiser, living thing flexing with the sea's temper. Oars dipped steadily. Timbers groaned under shifting loads. CGI cross-sections reveal the intricate anatomy. The overlapping planks, rowers' positions, storage holds. Each component balanced speed with survival, tradition with adaptation. A nautical anthropologist sums it best. Their greatness was not in invincibility, it was in adaptability. To sail a Viking longship was to live on the edge between order and chaos, mastery and surrender. The keel is laid with whispered blessings over steamed oak, smoke curling round hands roughened by rope and salt. Eric stands firm at the helm, steady despite the weight of every soul depending on him. Phratis tightens her braided hair, muscles coiling like a spring, ready to release. Canute moves briskly, checking the last water bladders, their skins taut and swollen. Olaf watches silently, pale and still as the first salt-laden breaths mingle with the faint scent of burning incense. The scrape of rope over wood is muted by the morning hush. Iron nails clink softly as they fasten the last plank. The first oar dips into the cold grey sea. The longship responds instantly, gliding forward with purpose, each stroke a promise whispered into the chill. Hands blister and sting as water sprays across faces hardened by salt and wind. The oarlocks snap tight, keeping rhythm with muffled chants rising like steady heartbeats. The horizon stretches empty and endless, an ocean of iron grey waiting to test every sinew and resolve. Days drift by, marked only by the sea's unchanging iron grey. Boredom weighs heavy. Salt sores bloom like silent warnings across shoulders. Canute tends a cauldron on deck, steam curling into the salty air and condensing into brine on his frozen hair. Phratis shifts uncomfortably, muscles aching beneath sodden wool. Olaf counts waves with dread mounting in his chest, eyes wide and searching. The hiss of boiling water blends with the sour temps of fermented fish, the cold biting into exposed skin like unseen teeth. Black clouds gather overhead like vultures on the wind. Foam churns white and angry at the bow. The ship moans beneath the rising gale. Phratis races to secure the sail, frostnumb fingers tangled in lines that threaten to bind or break. Oars leave their troughs, wrapped in chaos. Eric yells commands, voice barely carrying over the roar. The wind screams through rigging like a living thing. Salt spray stings, eyes roar, wood splinters with every violent snap. Night descends like a stone, crushing the sky. The sea vanishes beneath a pitch-black fog, swallowing all landmarks. Olaf shivers uncontrollably, delirious with cold and fear. Phratis presses seaweed damp and cold against his chest, murmuring words she barely believes. Eric squints through pulses of sunstone light, searching for guidance in the thick, relentless mist. Wet seaweed chills skin, frost breath mingles with whispered prayers. The faint glow of sunstones flickers in the darkness like distant stars. After endless struggle, jagged rocky shore looms suddenly through grey dawn light. Survivors drag numb limbs onto cold stone, victorious yet hollow. Frostbite scars mar raw hands, shield drip beads from battered armor. The fire crackles weakly fragile warmth amid the wreckage. Broken shells crunch beneath boots. The sharp scent of burnt wood and wet fur cuts the air. Quiet sobs escape like whispered confessions beneath a biting wind. Hands blistered raw from oars and ropes tell the tale of the voyage. Spirits fray beneath hunger, cold, and fear. Phratis massages aching forearms, fingers working knots and bruises. Canute cleans fish, blood from cracked nails, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Olaf leans against the mast, vacant-eyed, body trembling beneath soaked wall. Salt stings torn skin. Stale bread leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. Heavy breaths fogged the chilled air, each inhale a reminder of endurance. The wind whispers warnings through the rigging. The longship creaks and groans like a living beast straining against its bonds. Eric listens intently to every crack and sigh of wood, alert for signs of failure. Canute secures supplies below deck, moving with practiced urgency. Phratis watches the sky, muscles coiled and ready for what comes next. Wood flexes under the stress, canvas rustles softly, and the salt-laced wind bites unrelenting faces. Storms gather overhead, dark and swollen, but so too does resolve among the crew. Lines are clamped tight, oars braced, spirits strict. Freitas clamps a rope with fierce determination. Eric steadies the helm against rising fury. Olaf swallows his fear, breath steadying as he finds strength in the shared burden. Wet rope pulls taut between calloused hands. The steady beat of oars echoes beneath the storm's howl. Murmured prayers rise faintly, fragile shields against the coming tempest. Seabirds circle high above, their shrieks cutting through wind like signals from another world. Land approaches, unseen but sensed in the salt air and rising hope. Eric scans the horizon, reading birds and waves as an ancient script known only to those who dare the sea's embrace. The splash of wings against sea spray mingles with the sharp salt tints of nearing earth. The shore offers fragile shelter, at last a place to rest battered bodies and mend frostbitten hands. The crew gathers wood, its dry twigs crackling as flames catch. Canute prepares a meager stew over the fire, the sharp bite of smoke filling the cold air. Warmth slowly seeps into frozen bones, a brief reprieve from the unforgiving sea. Yet scars remain both visible and unseen. Pain and memory etched deep like ancient runes carved in wood. Freitas touches a scar on her forearm, eyes distant with remembrance. Olaf shivers beside the fire, silent and withdrawn. The ache beneath skin hums quietly, as does the steady pulse of the sea at night. Old prayers whisper on the wind, half forgotten but never gone. Yet scars remain both visible and unseen. Pain and memory etched deep like ancient runes carved in wood. Freitas touches a scar on her forearm, eyes distant with remembrance. Olaf shivers beside the fire, silent and withdrawn. The ache beneath skin hums quietly, as does the steady pulse of the sea at night. Old prayers whisper on the wind, half forgotten but never gone. Eric kneels on the sand, planting the steering oar firmly. His hands tremble, rough and salt-cracked, tears mingling with brine on his weathered face. He murmurs a prayer for those lost, for those who endured. The sea's voice lingers softly around him, waves lapping against the shore in gentle cadence. Dawn breaks slowly over the horizon, warm light cresting an endless grey expanse. The hush of survival settles like a fragile promise on the air. A carved runic stave rests atop the helm, its weathered lines spelling out SOF. Salt and time have smoothed the edges, but the promise remains, a sacred pact to the sea goddess, who demands respect and tribute. Gold rings and silver cups slip silently beneath foaming waves, prayers trailing with the wind's salty breath. The sea spray mingles with the sharp scent of burning resin, coins clinking softly as they sink into the depths. These offerings were no mere superstition. They were rituals anchoring fear in ceremony, transforming dread into purpose, and binding the crew's fate to the ocean's moods. Before the first oar cleaves the water, blood is spilled. Hands clasped tightly, wrists nicked to mingle, crimson a solemn vow sealed in iron and silence. The crew pledges unity, to stand firm against storm and sea, or perish together. Betrayal means exile or death, cast into the sea's cold embrace. The sharp sting of the blade cuts through the air, the heat of blood slick on weathered skin. Names are murmured with weighty solemnity, binding men beyond kinship. Such oaths forge unbreakable bonds, where mutiny becomes sacrilege. Endurance transcends family ties. Salt sores bloom, sleepless nights stretch on, but the oarsmen row as one organism, knuckles whitening against rough wood. Mutiny is quelled not just by threat of punishment, but by invoking runic curses, psychological chains stronger than iron shackles. The rhythmic splash of oars punctuates whispered curses passed like secrets, a shared ache vibrating through every muscle. This collective suffering is a survival mechanism, drawing strength from unity amid torment. Berserkers lead the chants, shore, guttural, primal. Their voices rise over the storm's roar, pounding like drums that sync the crew's rhythm. Muscles pulse to the beat, pain dulled by the shared heartbeat of song. The rasp of voices, hoarse with salt air, blends with the steady pounding of wood striking water. Music and myth fuse here, transforming terror into power, chaos into control. The sea is a living force with moods to be read. Waves swell, foam shifts color, clouds drift in silent messages. Eric studies swell patterns. Phratis watches seabirds circling uneasily overhead. Omens from Agia, god of the sea, offer warnings or blessings, interpreted through centuries of lore. The hiss of wind mingles with gulls, sharp cries, and the eerie shimmer of shifting waters. Every sailor's intuition is sharpened by myth and observation, cultural wisdom guiding the voyage. Runes carved into wood and flesh are more than symbols, they are weapons against fear. A shield maiden carves runes into her arm. Another marks the mast with protective signs. These markings create invisible boundaries, forged by belief and fear alike. The scrape of a knife on wood, fresh blood shimmering in the fading light, and a hush settling over the crew follow each curse uttered. This runic magic shapes both the physical and mental landscapes of the journey. Myths fill the empty horizon's tales of sea serpents twisting beneath waves. Drowned sailors lost to watery graves, enchanted islands beckoning from mist. Around campfires, these stories unfold in firelight, a sacred script to confront the unknown. The crackle of flames, the hush of awe, and the distant crash of waves create an atmosphere where peril is both feared and revered. Lore gives form to chaos, guiding sailors as much as any star or stone, though sunstones and stars guide their hands. The greatest navigation tool is faith in each other and in God's demanding courage and sacrifice. Eric's fingers brush the runic stave at the helm as the crew kneels in silent prayer beneath a sky heavy with stars. This faith turns isolation into communion, fear into resolve. The faint hum of chanting mingles with flickering torchlight and the steady pulse of oars cutting dark waters. More than a geographical journey, this voyage is a passage of mind, spirit, and shared myth. In the vastness of the sea, their faith alone is the only shore. Water seeped steadily beneath the deck, pooling cold and unwelcome beneath the crew's feet. The Vikings met this intrusion not with despair, but ingenuity. Hand-cranked, pump-simple wooden devices turned, tirelessly, by calloused hands and carved chutes etched directly into the ship. S-strakes funneled water rapidly overboard. Each crank brought a rush of relief, as bilge water spilled through narrow channels, the ship's belly groaning with the effort. The wet slap of pooled water echoed faintly in the hull, mingling with the creak of timber flexing beneath shifting weight. The stale, salty tanks of brine rose, thick in the stagnant air. These were humble yet vital systems, ancient engineering born from necessity. Without them, men might drown not only in storms, but in their own ship. As a marine systems engineer notes, these were simple but effective systems engineering that kept ships afloat and men alive. Before setting sail, fish were cured deep within bog salt pits, nature's own refrigeration preserving the precious bounty. Salted herring barrels were stowed below decks. while strips of dried cod hung aloft near the mast to dry in the salty sea breezer, lean but essential food source. The sharp tang of cured fish filled the air, mingling with the rough grain of wooden barrels and the smoky scent of cooking fires. These preservation methods walked a fine line between nutrition and spoilage, a constant battle on long voyages. Nutritional anthropologists observe that such techniques were crucial to survival. Balancing sustenance with the ever-present risk of rot, fresh water was sacred and scarce, stored in birch-bark bladders etched with runic markings. These vessels measured daily rations, carefully enforced by the helmsman Eric. Each sailor received only what was allotted, no drop wasted. The rustle of bark accompanied the soft pour of water into cups, mouths tightening against parched throats. Dehydration was a looming threat. Tight jaws and sunken eyes marked those who faltered. This ritual of rationing was as much a discipline as any oath sworn, a small mercy amid the unforgiving environment. As a systems engineer explains, water rationing was a disciplined ritual, a small mercy in an unforgiving environment. To fight scurvy, Vikings resorted to natural remedies. Fermented kelp packets were chewed to supply vitamin C, while sour milk, stored in clay crocks, supplemented their diet. Strips of dark, slimy seaweed passed between sailors, their sour tang-coating tongues parched from salt and wind. The tart aroma of dairy mingled with the ocean air, a modest but vital source of nourishment. Nutritional anthropologists recognize these as early forms of anti-scurvy. Regimen's primitive microgardens, born of necessity. Carved wooden chutes guided water swiftly from the deck, angled to exploit gravity's pull. Hand-cranked bilge pumps, though manual and labor-intensive, worked ceaselessly to expel unwanted moisture. Water spilled down the strakes, escaping with a rushing sound that promised survival. The strain on wooden handles was palpable, the salty spray flickering in shafts of sunlight breaking through cloud cover. These low-tech marvels were lifesavers, forgotten innovations of the Viking Age. Below deck, barrels of salted fish, fresh water, and grain were packed tightly. Every inch accounted for to balance the ship and preserve vital provisions. The damp, musty smell of hold air mingled with the wooden thud of shifting barrels as the ship rocked. The lingering taste of salt clung to sailors' fingers. Managing these stores demanded constant vigilance, a precarious balance between skill and fortune. Nutritional experts note the daily challenge of protecting rations from rot and pests was as vital as any battle at sea. Some ships carried primitive microgarden, small caches of wild herbs and fermented seaweeds, cultivated in shallow crates to supplement the monotony of preserved foods. Sailors tended these patches carefully. The fresh bitterness of greens and salt tang of herbs offered rare flavor and much-needed nutrients. The soft rustle of leaves in the sea breeze was a reminder that survival required more than bread and salted meat. Such ingenuity hints at an early understanding that nourishment extended beyond mere sustenance. Together, bilge management, water rationing, preservation techniques, and microgardens formed an intricate web of survival. Animation traces water ingress flowing from the bilge to the sea. Tally marks on birch bark measuring precious water rations. Barrels secured under benches shifting with the waves, and tender greens growing quietly amid the harsh salt air. The longship was a fragile ecosystem, a balance of engineering and human endurance. The drip of water, escaping carved chutes, murmured counts of rations, and crackling firelight on wet wood underscore the constant negotiation between sea and ship, body and spirit. Mastery of these hidden mechanisms was mastery over the sea itself. Satellites orbit high above, beaming precise coordinates that guide modern naval frigates slicing through calm seas. Below deck, GPS screens flicker alongside radar blips, autopilot steady at the helm. Yet, miles away in time and spirit, an ancient navigator clutches a sunstone, eyes scanning the overcast sky for the faintest polarization of light. The beep of modern radar pulses sharply. A soft glint catches quartz through the Viking's worn fingers. Technology enhances safety, but the sea remains a living challenge, unpredictable and wild. Modern crews rest in cushioned bunks, warm and sheltered. They savor hot meals steaming from galley kitchen's broth, fresh bread, comfort far removed from the past. Contrast this with Vikings huddled on bare wooden benches, muscles stiff and raw from rowing. Their sustenance, fish stew thick with salt and brine-soaked bread, harsh and relentless. Warmth rises from steaming bowls. Cold salt clings to wet wool. Mental health in these extremes depends on comfort and routine. Luxuries Viking sailors could only glimpse through ritual and sheer will. Desalination plants hum quietly below decks, turning seawater fresh and drinkable. Hydroponic gardens supply leafy greens year-round, a touch of earth amid endless ocean. Vikings relied on fermented kelp packets and rain-catch barrels, earthy seaweed drying on rigging in salt breeze. The hiss of filtered water contrasts with the chewy texture and briny temps of preserved seaweed. Our technologies solve some problems, but nature's ancient remedies were elegant and essential, born of necessity and deep knowledge. Modern wardrooms echo with toasts and laughter, a ceremony to build trust and morale. Vikings, to wielded ritual, sacrifice, rites, and runic chants cast into dark waters, binding crew and gods alike. Glasses clink softly. Coins splash into waves. Ritual anchors a crew, weaving cohesion from fear and uncertainty, whether in gleaming steel or carved oak. Morale is a timeless force, transcending technology. Isolation is a shared burden aboard any ship. Today, sailors practice mindfulness and receive psychological support. Vikings gripped the mast, eyes hollow in cold despair. The calm breath of meditation contrasts sharply with ragged gasps caught in biting wind. Mental resilience is crucial ritual, and trust, once stood where therapy and design now offer aid. Storms rage unchanged across centuries. Thunder roars. Rain lashes both modern frigate and Viking longship. Waves rise like mountains, testing steel and wood alike. Technology buffers these tempests, but does not erase nature's might or lessons learned on the sea. At the heart lies solidarity. Modern sailors clasp shoulders in support. Vikings bound hands in blood oath. The reassuring squeeze and the rough grip alike fortify weary souls. Cohesion is the strongest shield against isolation and despair. Though vessels evolve, the sea's demands remain. Humility, resourcefulness, solidarity. The Vikings mastered this harsh calculus without GPS or desalination, relying on spirit and shared myth. The longship's silhouette fades into the modern naval vessel cutting through waves. The steady beat of oars replaced by engine hum, salt spray unchanging. Their voyages remind us. Technology may guide us, but it's the human spirit that carries us home. The sun dips low over the fjord, casting a golden glow that ripples across the water. Against this fading light, the ghostly silhouette of a longship's sail drifts slowly, a whisper of voyages long past. They braved storms without satellites, starved without supermarkets, and trusted runes more than radios. Yet, despite hardship and scarcity, they sailed farther, forged stronger bonds, and turned scraps into innovation. Their journeys were marked by misery, but also by marvel. Eric the helmsman stands on the shore, weather-beaten and worn. His hands, scarred from years at sea, rest heavy on the steering or planted in the sand. His eyes hold distant memories of ice, salt, and storms that tested every fibre of his being. Nearby, a modern ship's captain closes the bridge door behind her, gazing out at calm seas. She carries the weight of history, respect for the lessons etched into time by those who came before. Travel by Viking ship was agony and awe, hardship and invention intertwined. Their grit, resilience, and lost arts still whisper across the waves, guiding us as we chart our own uncharted waters. Set sail into the unknown with courage, resourcefulness, and faith and technology, in each other and in the enduring spirit of discovery. A single oar, carved with ancient runes, lies half buried in the sand. It stands silent as a testament to voyages that shaped history's horizons, and the unyielding human will to explore beyond the edge.